We are recording with Miss Emily Moyer, who I met all of 30 seconds ago on Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, 11:14 a.m. Eastern Time. We're going to talk about the Chronovisor, which is kind of an odd little aside. It's basically like a time traveling quantum portal device that the Catholic Church has. But before we get into that, yeah, we were both talking about Rumble Studio, and so I met with Siraj yesterday, he's one of my buddies there. They brought in this shows my shrewd business mind is just immediately start talking bad about Rumble, who's helped me out so much. They brought in like their head tech guy. Yeah, we sat out there for like 45 minutes yesterday, and I mean, like we were talking about, unless something's intuitive. Like Siraj showed me how to live. I had never live streamed the first 1,200 episodes because I didn't know how, and it was just like, yeah, you know, really good 4K camera. Like we are talking about, if it's worth it, I'll sit down. I'm like, I want the show to look more professional. I slogged through a YouTube channel and figured that out. Some Indian guy told me how to do it on some video that's like 15 years old, and then I just don't press any buttons since. I love you, Rumble, but man, Rumble Studio is not intuitive. Even when I sat with them yesterday, we all left feeling more confused. And the only reason I want to do it is because you can get ad reads, and I didn't realize I was explaining it to you, and you know what it is. So you tell me your problems with it, and then we'll get into the show. And I'm going to post the live link, by the way. I'm not playing with my phone.
Sounds good, Tommy. And from our first, 6 minutes, 5 minutes of knowing each other, I feel like you might be a brother from another mother based on how it's going so far. So I was very early on to Locals, right? Which eventually got sold to Rumble. And so they're integrated in a way, right?
Just
and so
because I'm super subconscious about it, I'm posting the live link. I'm not playing with my phone. I'm not an asshole host. Sorry, keep going.
So this is my observation and therefore my opinion, which doesn't mean that you have to sign on to it or even that it's the truth.
Yeah.
But based on my interactions with the people from Locals, I've never interacted with someone who came from the Rumble side, but since they're one now, right? Like I've interacted with a number of Locals people, and they're all very nice, and they're actually very helpful.
Yeah.
And I haven't had any real quote problems with that. But it is not. Both Locals and Rumble are not intended for the type of creator that I am. They are intended for people who want their message to get out to everyone, who have a more political or social leaning message, and to the extent that it's not political or social leaning. Right. Like if it's conspiracy or metaphysics or woo-woo or sports in some way, that it can interact with like the political or social group that tends to be attracted to that in a way that creates a lot of clickbait type of scenarios. And so like everything about their system is set up for people that want to get the most views possible, that want to generate the most amount of ad revenue, that have a staff, that have a tech person that can figure out all of that stuff. It is not necessarily intended for a type of creator who, my message is not for everybody. My message is for the correct people. I realize that there are others who might enjoy some things I say, but I'm like deeply invested in trying to figure out what the fuck is really going on here. Like, not like the fun thing to talk about, although it can be fun, right? And so for me, most of my, followers and the way that I've earned any kind of money or living doing this at all has been from people who have invested in me long-term and at a more significant level than most people who watch on Rumble or even Locals do. Like I, from the very beginning, started requesting that Locals add tiers. Like I had a meeting with them early on. They were willing to pay me to leave Patreon and become like just on Locals. But ultimately I couldn't accept that offer, even though I felt like for someone who had a small sized audience, that was a generous offer, what they were willing to pay me. But because they're not interested in doing tiers, they're not interested in creating sort of like material that's exclusive, not based on like, okay, you're paying $5 to get in, but like people have to think about, do I want to invest this much money? Do I want to think about this because this is a more significant investment? Do I really want to engage this material, or do I just want to be entertained by it? Right. And it became clear to me, and remains clear to me, although they still have meetings with me on a semi-regular basis, that this is not what they're about. And so the only benefit to me of Rumble and Locals is the ability that they provide some data space, right? And so far they have been a free speech platform.
Yeah.
I'm not
Right.
confident that that will continue.
No platform can last forever. It's just,
Well, just also based on the way that scenario came to be and the people associated with it, I trust that I sense that they believe in free speech except for on one topic ultimately, and so far that hasn't affected everyone else. But I could see that it could become at some point based on the number of people with an aligned opinion that have flocked to like high positions in that sort of realm, the Locals Rumble realm, on some level. But that I don't know that to be true. And
sure.
so far, they have followed through on everything that they have promised me. And so I respect that, right? But I also don't feel comfortable investing a lot of time and energy in making my stuff adapted to their scenario, because I've had rugs pulled out from underneath me before. So I diversify, like I spread my material out a lot of places, so that it's an easy transition if one thing doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And it also, like, I'm cool with making it sometimes not super easy to find my material. I'm a child of the rave, right? So my map points and secret codes and things like that are beneficial for,
Well,
getting something
and it
that is
finds
not for
you,
everyone.
right? It was Timothy, maybe it's Timothy Leary, maybe it's Ram Dass. He's like, you don't find acid finds you.
Correct.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a little bit of that. If your heart's really in it, not to go full like woo woo, but if your heart's in it, there is a thread there that the people that matter find. Not to sound like a total like douche either, but like, and I get it. I mean, I pay for Tim Dillon, who I think is the funniest human alive. I pay for his Patreon. It's $5 a month. That's it. I don't pay for any Audible, but I'm buying books. I don't
Right.
know podcasts. I don't care. When Rogan went to Spotify, I legitimately was like, I don't even want to download a new app and
Me
just
too.
stop. So being a child of like Napster and LimeWire, I also know there's no such thing as a paywall in all sincerity. There is for people that support me, they're cool and they're like, yeah, I'll throw you $5 a month, $10 a month. I also know full well if I were to ever like hide it all and be like, you can't get in unless it's, I'm like, dude, that's gonna be the first thing. Me and my little brother always left. The first thing you did when you downloaded the free version of LimeWire was use LimeWire to down LimeWire Pro, which was the paid
Right.
version. But
Right.
it's like the first thing you did when the genie gives you 3 wishes is you wish for more wishes. Well, you're not allowed to do that. All right. Well, I wish to change the rules of it's the very first thing dissolves it all. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And yeah, the vast majority, I get like super chats through like I do a video game stream too. But I would say no. I mean, probably like 95% of like all revenue I've ever got are from people who legitimately love the show.
Yep.
They love what I'm doing. They'll even say like, I don't even agree with all that you say, but like I like that you have people on and you don't, you know, I don't try to make it some like Fox News or CNN table. Well, can you believe Obama? Well, what about Trump? I was like, dude, I'd rather blow my head off.
Yeah.
Like 95% of all revenue are from people that like write me like a $1,000 check or something, or like a $5,000 donation or something, and they don't have to. I'm certainly not
Yeah.
providing them with that content, but they're people who've just got some disposable income and they like me and they've watched enough. That's the other thing. It's like you never know who's watching. So all like the cheesy like I'm gonna stand up for free speech and do the right thing. You'd be surprised of how many people who like have money and who I imagine are just used to being surrounded by snakes will eventually reach out and be like, I've been watching you for years and like it's not an act. They're like, I think you're kind of an idiot and a bit cocky, but they're like, I respect what you did. It's some like anonymous people just like send me like one person sent me like an ounce of gold once. I was like, what the heck? Like, all right, cool, let's do it. But
Yep.
because you and I are just circle jerking on the problems with all this stuff. But no, ultimately Rumble and Locals, they're the hands down least evil, lesser evil. And when I say that,
This
I mean,
time, correct.
so yeah,
At this
I've never been censored. Yeah, at this
time.
time, and I've said that since the beginning. Like, nothing. I mean, Google's original thing was "Don't be evil." Like, it's not like looking down on the people at Rumble. It's just human nature. Like,
Right.
this will go. Spotify censored one of my episodes for the first time like 2 months ago. It had never happened before. Like, it's the nature of things. To think it won't is just silly. It
Yep.
will. And in 20 years, when Rumble is bigger than YouTube, they'll start squashing stuff because some campaign's going to donate or the FBI is going to give them some FISA warrant that says you got to, and it's going to be weird, and it's either it's going to be a pandemic or a war, and people.
Or there will be a law passed that they agree with,
Yeah,
that they
exactly. And
actually agree with, and so they'll be fine with adjusting
that's
themselves.
exact. My buddy Drew Bob, he and I game every night, and I mean, like like when I first got somebody like banned, not banned, but like from he was just this dude was a legitimate stalker. Like I like filed with the FBI. Like he was stalking other doctors. He was impersonating Branch Covidian. Like legitimately thought he was Batman and legitimately
Right.
thought I was pure evil. And I worked with like locals in Rumble, and they're like, "Yeah, this is like he is, and he's impersonating my company, which is a felony." And so we got him banned. And I was like, I didn't want to do that. I don't like banning people, but I was like, that guy had to go, man. And Drew Bob
Yeah.
made me think, and he goes, he's like, and I get it. You showed him to me. This guy's a creep. Like, I bought a gun because of this guy. And he was like, we got to wonder, is this how the censorship arc starts?
Sure.
Oh,
Right.
boy,
I mean,
no, but it's just one guy, dude. It's just, how does it
it
start?
just
How
takes
does it start?
one turd in the
It's
punch bowl to make it
very
under.
true. It's very
So
true. Yeah, no. And so I have to be humble
yeah.
and go, you're right. I mean, do I? Oh, I'm not YouTube. This is different. Do you not think the people that first censored at YouTube thought they were just? So, but again, ultimately, Rumble and locals are still, I think, the best things out there. I wouldn't prove this in the pudding. That's where I put all my stuff. Um, and
So
people,
far they've kept their word with me, and that's
so
essentially that's how I judge
yeah,
people. Right?
exactly.
So
I've got
that's
all
that's
my hard drives at different physical locations. I'm like, I don't care what happens to Rumble or BitChute or Odyssey or CloutHub or Brighteon or FrankSpeech or YouTube or Twit. I'm like, I don't. I've got my contingency plans. My annoying voice will survive the apocalypse.
right.
Um, but because yeah, for the 99.999% of people watching that aren't content creators, they're like, what is this shit? What are you talking about? I don't care. So the Chronovisor, which I was just like a video I stumbled upon, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And I like went back and like watched a couple more things. And it's just like it's a cool idea of, from my understanding, it's something that kind of looks like like an old TV from like the 50s or 60s, like a Catholic, just a big kind of hulking behemoth. And it's something that, according to like lore, and not just lore, but very prominent, like Marconi, Werner von Braun, this former like arch or top guy at the Vatican, is a device that can peer into any event in the past. It's not a time machine, but it's an event that you can just go watch. You can watch Napoleon give speeches. You can watch the crucifixion of Christ. And according to lore, from what little I know about it, is it was made. It was incredible. They like watched, the crew. They're like, it's all real. It's not an interpretation. It's whatever. And then the Pope was like, this could also be set up because they, I guess, again, according to legend, they also used it to like bust a local like robbery that was going to happen in Rome or something. They just wanted to see how real it was. And like the cops went there and they found this is all the lore, and they went, but this could be used to create a dictatorship unlike anything anyone's ever seen. So it's not just looking in the past, and it's not wiretaps where it's like you gotta no. You can go when there wasn't electronics. You can go find out what people were saying in their room in the year 1211 in Scotland. And they could also, because they stopped robberies, they could see things into the future. And so they dismantled it and said that it's, I guess like the designs for it exist in the Vatican Library and in some like vaults in Switzerland. That's the idea. I don't know anything about it. I just love the idea of it above all else. Like, Tommy, what's your documentation? I don't know. I just like it. So, and somebody, I don't remember who, texted me or emailed me. They're like, hey, I know someone that can talk to you about the Chronovisor. And I was like, awesome. Perfect. So that's all I know about it. I put it in the description. I think I put the YouTube video I found. And if you email me your stuff, I'll put your Rumble and locals and all that stuff in there as well. So I'm not a bad host. But that's as much as I know. And now I'm just going to hand it over to you.
All right. So when you reached out to me and I was like, well, that's interesting. I wonder why Jerry would recommend me
Yeah.
for talk about the Chronovisor, because I don't see myself as any kind of expert
Sure.
on the Chronovisor. Of course, on some level, I know what it is. I went back and reviewed, because that's kind of long back for me in my sort of conspiracy research and whatever it is. But when I sort of reminded myself of all the sort of information and factors around it, it's like, oh, well, like I see Jerry's just acknowledging that I've become, in some weird haphazard way, a self-styled, I don't know that expert would be the word, but person who likes to talk about temporal and dimensional travel or movement. Right. And that's what we're basically kind of talking about here. So just to I have some notes that I made, right, about like the things that kind of come to my mind based on having refreshed myself. And of course, I want to obviously is time. Chronos is the god of time, right? And then visor is, is at least in terms of like the television, not in terms of the hat you wear when you're playing golf or tennis or whatever, is something you use to look at something. So observation of time, right? And a couple things pop up for me. Like I remember my main sort of digging into this was around it's sort of correlated in some ways with Project Looking Glass, right? And I became highly aware of Project Looking Glass in like the 2011, 12 kind of period, right? Where a gentleman named Bill Wood, who later became Bill Brockbrader or something, was speaking about this quite a bit. And it sort of revived the excitement around the idea that had previously, many years earlier, been spoken about on, with Art Bell and on shows, right? And so, but to me, like the most probably underwatched, but sort of public expose on some level of this idea is the television show Fringe. Have you ever watched the television show Fringe?
No.
All right. So the television show Fringe is it's a J.J. Abrams joint, and it's probably his least watched but most important, in my opinion, right? Everything I say is my opinion. It doesn't mean it's fact. And what it is it's basically a series of threats to, like, unusual threats to national security open up into the awareness that scientific experiments that occurred in the 60s and 70s around project that was kind of like, that was like MK Ultra, basically had led to a scenario where these technologies had gotten into different hands than the people who had originally developed them and were being used to influence world events, right? And at the end of the day, what we were really looking at was temporal and dimensional movement, distortion, and experimentation. And it all started with this group of characters called the Observers, right? And I brought a little clip, if you have screen share and you don't mind,
Let's do
a
it.
short clip that explains what the Observers are.
Yeah, go for it. All yours.
All right, awesome, cool. So wait a second, I did that wrong. Let me make sure I do it
When we were
correct.
talking about, like, learning new things, I didn't learn how to screen share until I think episode 1200.
I'm really into screen sharing.
No, I was literally just like, I just never figured it until finally I was like, I've had enough people ask me. All right.
Oh yeah, I'm a prolific screen sharer.
Beautiful.
Okay, so here we go. So here's a short little explanation of what the Observers are and what they do.
things have been blowing my mind for a while now. Do you see the little half circle with wings? That appears on a cuneiform tablet at the Iraqi National Museum. It's one of mankind's earliest attempts at writing. And do you see this little triangular curlicue thingy? That's etched on the Iron Pillar of Delhi, 900 BC. It's pretty weird, right? So Nina Sharp says you're FBI too. You don't look FBI.
So you have no idea what any of them mean?
What the symbols mean?
Yeah.
No, I have no idea. But I found something else. We all remember Paul Revere's Ride, one if by land, two if by sea. But before that, he was famous for his engraving of the Boston Massacre, 1770. Oh, come on.
Well, that could be anybody.
Marie Antoinette, 1793. Sarajevo, 1914, minutes before Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot, kicking off World War I.
So they have been around forever.
Or else they're not limited by our human perception of time. Are you with me? We think of time as linear, right? Life is a journey. You're born, and then you die. And to get from one end to the other, there's only one way through. Unless you look at it like this, and then you can see at any point. It's all happening at once.
So they're traveling through time.
No, it's more like they're observing time. I think these guys show up at important moments. Historical, technological, scientific, but it's rare. Maybe 24 different definite occurrences in the past 5,000 years of human history. But recently, I've charted 26 sightings in the past 3 months alone. That kind of makes you wonder. Why now? And what's about to happen?
Okay, so I people who haven't watched Fringe, I recommend that they do. It's a great series, and it really does a good job of cataloging all of the things we've heard about in association with like MK Ultra, secret military projects, like black operations, like all kinds of human experimentation, and putting it into like a digestible format where somebody who's like, oh, that just sounds too crazy, can see how what might actually look like in the world, right? But what the observers basically did is they had these little devices that looked like binoculars, right? And they would look through them and it would create almost like a weird coordinate map, right? And they would note on their notebooks in like weird little symbolic language some stuff, right? So like and then they were able to insert themselves and into whatever it is that they were sort of, zeroing in on some level, right? And this is shown in a variety of ways over the course of the 5 seasons of the show.
Well, kind of like that scene in Interstellar, right, where he's like in the 5th dimension or something. It's like the infinite cube board, and it's like every almost frame of life is one,
Yes.
like this camera, like 60 frames per second. It's whatever the frames per second. But you can go to every frame in space time.
Correct, right? And you can, once you have every snapshot, you could technically rearrange them in any order you want.
Sure.
That's what film editors and things like that do, is they change, something's been recorded in this
on an
linear
iMovie
fashion.
timeline, you can pick it up and flip flop and make whatever you want.
You could completely, right? That's what flashbacks in movies become.
And then, even right now, people watching will be like, well, you guys can't do it. Correct. Well, we're live, but whoever's in this is live to Rumble. When I upload it to Twitter later, it will be a recorded video. I can absolutely take this part right now, clip it, put it at the center of the video. There was no violation.
Correct. And you hear people talk about having experiences of missing time. If you literally cut a portion out of this interview and don't post it, right? And people and I'm sitting here going, well, I know we talked about this.
Yeah.
Where is this thing,
Yeah.
right? That is literally equal to sort of missing time for someone on an experiential level, right? So okay, so in Fringe, they were definitely moving, like they were doing like distortion of time, but also movement between different dimensions or different universes or different versions of reality. There was also activity moving around, like teleportation, you know, on the same timeline in the same dimension type of thing. There was all sorts of experiments shown, power, so cold fusion type of stuff, genetic engineering, all kinds of things, right? Because it's all related, right? And as to, so this idea, whether the chronovisor is a real thing or not, is kind of irrelevant. My guess would be that like most of the stuff that they allow us to get like our mind around, and the way it's presented in many TV shows and movies, is they like this idea that we believe that there is a device that is needed to do this, and that someone smarter than us or someone with more money than us either created the device, found the device, or controls the device, and there's no other way to have that skill or have that experience than that.
Yeah,
right?
don't even bother looking, guys. It's
It's hidden in the basement in the Vatican.
That's like
right?
the carrots in World War II, or the vitamin A is, I guess, good for eyesight, lutein, and so the British spread propaganda throughout Nazi Germany that the British were eating a bunch of carrots, and that's why they were spotting the planes at night, because they didn't want them to find out that they had discovered something called radar.
Right. This is exactly.
Like, don't even look. Don't even. What's the A bomb? Was that based on physics? Nope. There's magic. You guys don't have it. Sorry. Don't even bother enriching uranium. Don't even try. Just, we're in charge.
Correct.
Yeah.
So to the extent, so there may or may not be a device. My guess is that there probably is a device, and there's probably other things as well. But the more important thing is this idea that it's hidden in the Vatican, and the Vatican created it and controlled it. There's already the admission in all of the information around the chronovisor that the friar who was responsible for this idea was also a physicist. And now we're really starting to understand what religion is largely actually about, or a cover for on some level, which is nuclear science, nuclear physics, and genetic engineering. This is my opinion, right? That these spiritual books or mythologies or stories are encoded, they're codes about science and genetics, in my opinion, right? And for the people who are the exoteric experiencers of these stories, they are personified and believed to either be true or like metaphors for morality. And on some level, that's correct. But for people with the eyes to see, the ears to hear, or the awareness to understand what's really being talked about, these are explanations for how things happen in reality, right? So if you think about, so I have one of my shows where we take like an esoteric look at the periodic table, right? It's called Elementary School. Because I don't know about you, but in elementary school, which is where you're supposed to learn about how the world works, I think, and it's not just propaganda, but it's mostly propaganda. I learned that there was a periodic table, right? I learned that there was a certain number of elements on the periodic table. Maybe in junior high or high school, I memorized or some what those elements were. But in terms of understanding them, we were only really taught about 2 or 3 of them, right? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, right? Like just a few. And then everything else was like, that's not important.
Don't worry about it. Technetium.
Correct.
Don't worry about it.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
And certainly like whatever the relationship between them is, who came up with this idea, like, are there anything elements that aren't on the periodic table? Does the periodic table grow? Like, there was just not that much conversation about it. And, you know, what I have come to understand as we slowly move our way through this is that all of the elements can be associated with like a god or a character from some version of mythology or spiritual or metaphysical historical tales or something like that, right? And it's kind of like whenever these two characters get together, boom happens, or symbiosis happens, or whatever it is. And it can sort of mimic or mirror when these two elements are put together in the petri dish, or when these, right, kind of thing. So I've also taken a look at like esoteric nutrition and anatomy, and a lot of these can also give you a lot of information about like diet and supplementation and things like that, right? So it all depends on how you look at it. It's kind of these tombs, these large collections of stories that have had, at least in our version, our span of history, have been, present for a long time. Like, if you look at it from one angle, it seems to be one thing. If you look at it from another angle, it seems to be something else, right? There's a bunch of different ways to decode it, very few of which represent in the way simple religion does this like story that sounds kind of nonsensical, right? On some level, but people take it very seriously and they get very offended if you don't agree with their version of how that story goes.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is most people who are deeply religious are very suspicious of science. Now, I'm not even going to get into addressing scientism, which is what we're experiencing these days.
Yeah.
But I think what a lot of people don't really understand is that the religion is a story about science, real science, right? Observations of what happens in the natural world, and then using those observations to sort of be able to make an assumption about what might or what will likely happen next, or what will happen if you take a course of action, or whatever it is, right? So the Vatican, the Vatican is responsible, like the Catholic Church on a lot of levels is responsible for time the way we experience and understand it, right? Have you ever heard the term seize the day?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, cesium is what the most precise clocks use to keep time, okay? And cesium is also part of, quote, nuclear, it's a element. Correct.
The most famous spy plane ever, the SR-71 Blackbird. They would actually spray cesium in the exhaust because it helped reduce the thermal stig. I mean, it poisoned everyone, but whatever.
Correct. So the Catholic Church had these clocks that they were using just to make sure that they were
clocks, yeah.
They did their prayers on time. They had a very strict schedule they were keeping. But the town, right, the towns would hear the bells of the clock, and people naturally started aligning with that, right? They started using that as a barometer for we can meet here at this time and do this thing. And eventually it was started to be used and able to control people's labor, right? The punching the time clock and punishing people if they were late, and putting a value
Pavlovian
time.
Yeah.
Right. Prior to this, people were paid based on how much they could produce. So if you made a pair of shoes, the shoes were that someone was willing to pay you for those shoes. This switched things from being like production based to being time based. And people were like, you punch in at this time, you punch out at that time, you get paid this much, per hour. The person who can produce the most
experience ever.
Right. And this is what brought in the thing that we are living under, that some people would call domination or slavery or whatever. But what it really is that we are living inside of time. And if you can get outside of time, the way that you observe it looks differently. So the observers were observing time, right? And then stepping in to experience it at certain moments, right? They recognize that there's these people that they're fascinated with who seem to have a different relationship to time than they have. And while they can't understand some of the choices that the people make, they're also in some ways fascinated with.
It's like National Geographic. We're like watching ants. And we're like, look at them go.
Right. Well, there's things that humans do based on emotion, love, fear, all of this kind of stuff that to someone who doesn't experience those things because everything is a mathematical calculation to them would probably be like us watching fucking soap operas. Like, this is
Yeah.
kind of nonsense, but I can't stop watching. Right. And eventually you find yourself becoming part of that story. Right. So to me, time is not a given. Time is something that has either been created or introduced, right, and has been used to get people to for there to be a boundary to the human experience, right, that makes things controllable and predictable. And there can be benefits to this, and there can be drawbacks to this.
It's a tool that can be used as a weapon, or it's like, is the calendar necessarily bad? Nah, it's probably good for farming. It's probably I like Christmas. I love the feeling of it, but it's also, then there's the idea. I mean, being my own boss for a couple of years now, it's literally taken a couple years to like undo 30 years of like Friday's the last day of work, and it finally dawned on me. I was like, I can start on Sunday and it end on Thursday, or you don't have to do 5 days. But it was
Right.
literally like, as an adult, I was like, I used to just push through to Friday because I was like, Fridays, you work till Friday, and then you're supposed to be tired on the weekend. And I was like, what? I mean, like, for like the first couple of years of doing this, I was trying to like break it. I would wake up at noon every day and not go to bed till 4. Because I was like, I want to break the idea that you have to be like early to rise to be a hard worker. I'm like, I'm a hard worker. I got into med school. I do this podcast. I work out every day. I read hundreds of books. I'm like, why did you got to be up at 4 a.m.? And I'm like, no, I can be up at 4 a.m. I can still be up at 4 a.m. I can wake up at noon and still go crush it. And that was just like a personal thing. And that was no incentive. That was just, but imagine if you never get that freedom, or imagine if you don't get that freedom until you're retired. And then you might be like, yeah, I'm too tired to even, I get
How
it.
many people die like a year after they retire?
Yeah. My parents are retired now, and like they still work all the time, but they're like notably more happy because they're like chopping wood and they like live up in the mountains. But like, so much of it is this weird momentum where you're like, we work until Friday and the blah 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 blah, and it's like, you don't have to do it. I mean, and that's just based on, that's just like momentum. So yeah, it's like, is time in our calendars? But no, you and I met at 11 a.m. and I texted you and said I'm going to be 10 minutes late, and like that works. But then there's like, 5 p.m. everyone leave, or it's like 7 a.m. we got to get up, and we got to be in a rush because it's the morning, and the morning is rush hour, and by default things, like forever, I would wake up and I'd be like, gotta get the day started, the podcast, and blah blah blah, and like now I'm just like, yeah, I'll get it all done. I'll get it all done when I get it done. And that's, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, no, it's a tool that can be used as a weapon or as an aid, right? A butter knife.
Right. So a couple of things. So you experience quickly, like, time has been really good to synchronize people and to get them aligned to a certain like frequency band of reality. And most importantly, that band, because they're all synchronized, has been led to believe in authority and hierarchy, right? And to continue, even though they might not like it, to participate in the perpetuation of that system. When you go from working for someone else to working for yourself, you have the very, like, for some people, it's this experience of freedom that you just spoke about. For other people, it's, you come right up to having to be disciplined and,
It's
and
terrifying.
responsible.
At
And,
first,
right?
it's terrifying.
It is super easy for me to show up on time for a work commitment when I'm working for someone else or when I'm working with someone else, right? And to do everything I can do to get the job done at the time that it's expected and that my pay sort of depends on. And when I don't have that, I'm kind of flailing with procrastination and like doing things that like I don't do when I'm going to work for someone else, right? And so, and then also you get to do what you want, but you have to pay for everything, right? You have to, so there's this level of discipline and responsibility that comes along when you decide to step out of having someone else measure the value of someone like authoritatively measure the value of your time. And instead you're going to go, I am the controller. I am the boss of my time. And I will leave it to the customers, the listeners, or whatever to assess a value on that. Right. And so, you're with your boss, you're getting paid regardless of whether or not anybody ultimately buys the product.
And you can turn your brain off on Friday.
100%.
I don't need to worry about the overhead and the new marketing plan for Q3 of next year and the new plant we're building in Des Moines. Nope. Sorry to interrupt you, but I always used to hate the idea of a job, and I'm like, I don't understand why people do it. You're a slave. Doing this for 5 years now, it's really only in the last year or so truly starting to get enjoyable and light. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in charge of myself. Man, I totally get now people that I've stopped looking down on people who have, I'm like, you're a sheep. I'm like, there are a lot of people that are like, I've got 3 kids and a wife. I like knowing the paycheck comes in. And I totally, I don't look down on that anymore. I totally get it.
Yeah. I mean, I've experienced both. I've experienced completely working for other people. I've experienced only working for myself. Right now, I'm in a hybrid model, which I think has been very good for me and very educational, helped me to become honest with myself about myself and about sort of the world out there, and learning to hone the skills, the discipline, the responsibility that I need to succeed as my own boss in a way, right? I learned the lessons from it. And then I went and, back into the working world, and I'm sort of sharpening some skills and coming to the hard, recognition of truth about certain things about myself. But I think the ideal for most people, because I think we live in a reality where there's much more going on and it works differently. We've been taught to just focus in on one band of reality, and then things will lay themselves out in a particular order. But the truth is that the nature of our realm is multidimensional and omnidirectional. And so having the freedom to move around, to hop from system to system, or location to location, or point of view to point of view, enables the experiencer the most flexibility and the most options for experiencing the maximum number of versions of reality possible for their ability to be able to handle it. Right. And so, this is part of developing the toolkit necessary, to become a temporal or dimensional mover. Now, I just wanted to say a couple of things. I want to toss a couple of things out here because I don't know how long you're planning to go, and then you can
we can yeah. This was I had another guest, and she had to cancel, so we're
okay.
We're free.
All right, cool. So a few of my favorite shows for looking at different ways that I see things based on some of these ideas. I've already mentioned Fringe. Probably my favorite television show of all times is Dark, which is a German TV show that has at this point been dubbed in English. So you don't have to read the subtitles. They voiced over it in English. It's on Netflix. I have a show called Dark Matter that I do with the folks from The Melt. And right now we've been in a very long deep dive on Twin Peaks, but we're probably going to go to Dark next. And Dark's treatment of time and space and dimension and whatnot is, I think, the best I've seen and most closely correlates with my experiences of this realm. Outer Range, which just had its second season post recently, is a version for people who like a little bit less sci-fi of a sci-fi series. Also really does a really good job with time and dimension based on location and element. 3-body problem, if you're the kind of person that needs there to be a headset, right? Some people need there to be a headset for it to make sense. And in that vein, also peripheral. I recommend people who are interested in this idea to look at those series to get one of them will resonate with you more than the others will, right? But it's kind of getting a view from a different side of the room of like the same set of ideas. And then, from like an experiential standpoint, right? The ideas of the chronovisor can also be experienced through the phenomenon known as remote viewing, which some people think is bullshit.
I had on Dr. Dale Graff, who literally was the head of the CIA program.
I'm
Yeah.
very familiar with Dale Graff, and
Dale
fascinated
Graff,
to bring him up because
he's
he's
a
been
cool
a
guy.
topic of conversation back channel in relation to some things that being looked at.
People ask me,
And
they're like, how did you get him? I'm like, I literally Googled his email, and it's just like on his books. It's like, email me at Mountain Viewer.
I'll tell you something when we're off the recording,
All right.
right? Okay. So, okay. So remote viewing, which, there's different techniques around it, different styles. There's like your Courtney Brown kind of version of it, right? There's Dale Graff. There's Ingo Swann is widely regarded as probably the top remote viewer of all time.
So
There's
Yuri Gell, and that's like telepathy.
Joseph McMoneagle,
Joe
a
McMahon.
bunch of right. Russell Targ.
I was
There's
just
a
about to
bunch
write
of
it down to
right.
interrupt. Project 8200, not to be, or maybe it was Operation Unit 8200 is Israel's NSA. I think Project 8200 something else. Maybe this was Operation 82. It's a thing with Joseph McMoneagle, and they're talking about all this remote viewing and stuff, and Dale Graff, and they're talking. It's like it's one of my favorite videos ever, and it's they talk about how they were like remote viewing, and they were just looking at the Earth, and under like Cheyenne Mountain where NORAD is, and then at 4 other locations on the Earth, they found these like ancient like monitoring stations that were like miles under granite, and there was 4 of them, and then there was like another one on the moon, and they together made like a giant dish, and they said there are people we're not people, there are beings just watching. They're not they're not good, they're not bad, they're not poking, they're not nothing, they're
observers.
They're
observing.
It's one of my favorite videos on YouTube, because I'm always just like, that's the craziest. It's like these nuclear. They're using them to like find Russian. They're not me taking mushrooms with my buddy up in the woods in Georgia in 2013. They're not us. This is like the highest level of military intelligence, and they're like, yeah, by the way, there's this weird. They said it's ancient but cutting edge.
But isn't it funny that the crossover between your mushroom experiences with your buddies and then what these like, right? That it's fascinating.
And then you're like,
right?
how are we tapping into this? And then you're like, oh, is that the gatekeeping? Don't let anybody take mushrooms or LSD, because you start to see like the walls of time dissolve. And is that the power for the plebs that we don't want them to have? History is just a series of gatekeepers. I mean, the mass used to be said in Latin, and you couldn't talk to God directly. And then you're like, wait, why isn't that now? It's starting to become legal. And really, in the last like 10, 15 years that weed and psychedelics are becoming decriminalized, now it seems like the powers that be are like trying to shake the whole chessboard, because it's like they're losing control. And sorry to interrupt. Like, yeah, you said Joseph McMoneagle, and that's
no. I mean, everything you said though, right? So remote viewing, there's a bunch of different techniques and ideas about it, right? Some of them maybe more militarized, some of them maybe more freewheeling, some of them make sense to me, some of them are harder for me to get my head around. Is like I struggle with like this idea that someone can write numbers on an envelope and give it to you, and you don't open the envelope, and then but somehow are able to zoom in on it. Like, that's a harder one for me to get my head around, but that doesn't mean that it's not real. It just means that like, that isn't how I do it. Like, I have had remote viewing experiences. For me, it's kind of more, it just happens. And then it's upon me to recognize what's happening and to pay attention, and then to be, and not judge what I just saw. And then eventually it will make sense. And usually it does. Right. So there's a lot of different styles, but there's also definitely this interesting crossover with psychedelics. Right. And like, what exactly and there's a variety of different psychedelics that have different properties or different, there's this like being on the different psychedelics is kind of similar to the different techniques around like remote viewing or out of body traveling or whatever. There's many different styles to achieve a sort of similar type of phenomenon, right? That has its own sort of hallmarks or like its own sort of decoration to it, right? And mushrooms are definitely an interesting one that I have a lot of experience with more than any of the other psychedelics. I had a really interesting series of shows about iboga that has a definite time travel component to it, and maybe is the closest to the idea of a chronovisor or to Project Looking Glass, right? So I did a series of 3 shows with a gentleman named James Johansson. And at one point, he was explaining to me about a buddy of his who took iboga. And what he saw when he was on iboga were kids playing in a backyard that with a device that allowed them to like zero in on something. What it was, he couldn't quite tell, but they had this like thing that looked like a Game Boy or some kind of like video game thing. And they would point it at something and it would zero in on it, and like a whole new world would sort of open up and they'd get to observe something else, right? Which sounds a little bit like the chronovisor, right? And to me, what I thought maybe they were doing, what it was focusing in on was either obviously like maybe there's like small little black holes or wormholes kind of all around us, and that's certainly possible. But what there also might be are certain particles that are reflecting or refracting or diffracting light in a certain way. So it's literally opening up like another angle or like a different like light spectrum, that there's a concurrent reality that exists in the same space, but like in a completely different like array of light, right? Like a completely different frequency or at a different angle, right? At a different perspective. It's like if you're on one side of the sculpture, it looks like an elephant. If you're on the other side, it looks like a bunny. It's the same sculpture, but it's arranged completely different based on perspective. And I think that would go a long way to people who have experienced like literally other versions of reality in their same space. Like when suddenly there's like someone else or something else in your apartment, right? That kind of thing. And especially if it's repetitive, if you've seen the same ghost in your apartment, you know, is there like a light hitting something at a certain angle? And when that does, you can see something that normally you can't, right? Is there the ability sometimes for communication across that, the things your cat's seeing and responding to, them being real, right? There's also an interesting, when you were talking about the points on Earth and the dish kind of thing, right? It made me think of, there's this really good TV series that it was only a season long. So unfortunately we didn't get to see where it was going, but I think I know why, called Night Sky, that had these chambers, right? There's also a really good book called Inside the Earth by Radu Sinamar that gets into some of these like chambers and what their access points to and whatnot. But, you know, I think that one of the things that psychedelics do, right? And there's psychedelics that are grow in nature, and then there's psychedelics that are synthesized, right? And when they synthesize them, they either take something from nature and like purify it or strip certain things out, or in a laboratory, they try to create something to mimic something else, right? So everything is based on something that sort of exists in nature, but those nature things are like, they're like mushrooms grow in the earth, in soil that have minerals in it, right? Elements, and those elements, like we have all of this stuff around us.
There's a definite, I've only done, I think, psychedelics on 5 times over 5 years. There's a absolutely experiential difference between psilocybin and LSD is certainly cool. It doesn't have like the psilocybin. So it's not like alcohol or something where you're just kind of like just fucked up. There's like a you know, it's like if you have anxiety because you haven't paid your bills, that's a real anxiety. If you just unfortunately have like chronic anxiety disorder, that's bad. With psilocybin, alcohol makes you happy and enjoy everything no matter what. Psilocybin, there's like a definitive, you're just like, everything's fine. Everything's going to be fine. Like, God is all around you. The earth is perfect. Like, everything's perfect. And life might be scary right now, but it's just you're here to learn something. Like, don't worry, like, God's got your back. Mother Earth's hugging you. Your ancestors are with you at every time. Your grandparents, your every person around you is like hugging you, and you don't really get that on as it allows you to like kind of peer and see some things. It's certainly good. Psilocybin definitely has like a natural. You're like, oh, this LSD is like porn. Psilocybin's
Well,
like
there's
sex with
no
someone you
LSD
love.
that hasn't been synthesized on some level, right?
Correct.
Like it comes from the ergot, right, or whatever, and then stuff has been done to it.
Yeah.
Mushrooms, you can go pull them out of the cow shit, or you can grow them in soil. Maybe there's some difference. I mean, you can grow them in your own dark lab, right? But what it is really is you have like it's minerals or elements that they're grown in that are lending the intelligence to fungus or tree roots or whatever it is. If you're talking about ayahuasca or iboga, that's tree root or bark based on some level. Like those, that's one intelligence. It's taking the information from the other intelligence, running it through a processor, and then delivering you some sort of like fruit or whatever that you eat. And then your system sort of unpacks and decodes all of that information in whatever way that it does, right? And different people have different responses to all of that, and the different psychedelics kind of do it differently and are better for this, that, or the other thing, right? But all of this stuff around us is recording history in its own way, recording what has happened here in this realm. Like people aren't the only ones who do that. Like literally everything around us is doing it too. And you can tap into that intelligence for a different perspective on something that you've only heard man's ideas about before.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah, we're leaving. It's like imagine. I mean, I don't know when fingerprints were not like, but like actual, not on your finger, but like the print it leaves. I don't know when those were actually discovered or something. But yeah, I mean, how many people in history? There's had to have been like a terrifying moment when that became discovered, and like all these shady people are like, oh my God, I've been leaving like footprints everywhere. The same thing with the idea that, all the electromagnetic light from all of our radios and everything is bursting out. I've always thought like, man, if you could travel faster than light and get, I don't know, 61 light years out, you could look back and watch the grassy knoll and be like, who shot Kennedy, right? It would be really attenuated. But then it's like, is that the only way it exists, that you got to travel faster? Like maybe maybe it's bouncing off of us, or maybe it's in a, imagine imagine the first time they did like created like thermal optics like 50 years ago, and they're like, oh my God, like, well, how many more things are we swimming in right now? Like, right. Imagine
Yeah.
explaining Wi-Fi to Napoleon. He'd be like, what are you talking? Well, then what's the equivalent? In 100 years, they're going to be like, man, Tommy and Emily had no idea that X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Like we're emanating what, you turn on like a new camera and you can see like, all of my internal, what I think are internal thoughts, where you're, sitting on a day, you're like, man, I have to fart. Like, who's to say that that's not like being broadcast or something? So, wise to say it's not happening all around us at all times. And it's the ultimate like CCTV. It's the ultimate security
Correct.
camera of vacation records, really.
The idea of the surveillance state comes from something that naturally is
Yeah.
already right? Like I always talk about the eye on the pyramid is letting you know that there's this like ionic nature to your reality, right? The eye on everything is letting you
Yeah.
know like this sort of plasma field that we live in, that sort of like recording and storing everything that can be tapped into from different times and different places, and perceived or received differently, right? And, I think that a lot of what secret societies have done is store, compartmentalize occult information about different ways of viewing the realm. Some of them maybe use like space or location, physical location, as like, did you ever play tetherball when you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
You have the pole and then the ball is spinning around it, right? So some use time or space as the anchor, and time is what moves around it, and others use time as the anchor and arrange space around it, right? And you have like with the Masonic floor, this idea of like the black and the white, or the dark lodge and the white lodge, and I think some of this has to do with like the light spectrum. And if you're looking at things like the way color arranges itself from the dark end of the spectrum or the light end of the spectrum and the different viewpoint that gives you on things. So it's different ways of using the same information. And it's also created this sort of convenient way of like people associating like the dark with evil and the light with good, when like really that isn't true. It's just a different way of seeing light, or the absence of light, and sound gets into this as well, because there's a really interesting relationship between sound and light. And if you have ever experienced like a very good sound system while you're on psychedelics or even not on psychedelics, you recognize the relationship. But you know, so it's created ways of compartmentalizing information, and people only being able to access that information when they have let go enough of their beliefs around something to see it from another angle, right? And then once you've seen something from another angle, the personal responsibility or discipline to change the way you deal with things based on that.
I was wrong. I know it, right?
Yeah.
It's you like go back and you see like a video from the night before. You're like, I was really being that drunk guy. I apologize.
Right.
I was that guy, man. I don't remember it that way. Like, you were being really mean, man. Dude, I apologize. Like, right? And then it's hard enough to find the evidence, but then when you do, can you kind of nut up and be like, I was wrong? And if people are worthwhile, they're not gonna shame you for being wrong, right? I got to use the restroom real quick. Tell everybody where to find you, and again, I will put your Rumble and locals in afterwards.
Sure. So you guys, I'm on YouTube at Emily Moyer. You can kind of find everything from there. My website is emilycmoyer.com. I'm on Patreon, patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, and rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. I have lots of different show concepts with different people. Some of my material is still posted publicly. Lots of it is behind a paywall because I'm just doing weird stuff, and I'm not necessarily trying to reach all ends of the earth with what I'm doing. So that's where you can find me. You coming back? Let's see how fast he is. I'll give him promo codes for locals that he can use if you guys want to try out a free month of my material. I have locals pages for my own work, as well as the projects I do with Michael Wan and others called Project Kids, and my Words podcast with Danny Katz. We do a live stream on Wednesday nights on YouTube called Word Salad, where we make fun of the clown show, which is the political and social scenario we find ourselves living in. All right, he's taking a long pee. There you are.
Sorry.
No worries.
Drink if you can't.
I had a dead moment for a second because I wasn't sure to keep going or to stop or what was going on.
You just gotta keep vamping. Just keep making things up. That's what I do. So I don't have.
Okay, I make almost everything up. So
yeah, I make up everything.
So one of the things, just as if we're kind of wrapping up, that
no, we can keep.
Okay,
cool. I got nothing doing.
Okay, cool. So I have noticed. So back to Chronovisor, right? Because the idea is that they're able to zero in on specific points in history and initially past, right? But Project Looking Glass, to the extent that that was a real thing or whatever, is more about looking into the future and being able to predict things. And we hear about like pre-crime and the Minority Report and all that kind of stuff, right? So to be able to zero in on a specific point, either in space or in time, and see what's going on, and that is largely correlated to like radiation, that there's sort of like a scratch or a scar or like a mark left on the space-time continuum that can be sort of tapped into, or that you can create a technology or a state of being through meditation or psychedelics or exercise that allows you to resonate with that and therefore sort of experience it or view it or become one with it. I have this weird thing happen. I think that that's right? I think that whatever this field is that we're living in, where we have a delusional or at least misunderstood belief in time and space, right? Like they exist, but not necessarily in the way that we think, or for the reason that we think, or that they're as persistent on some level as we've been led to believe. That there's these sort of energetic marks, right? And because you can view past or future ones, time isn't linear the way we think. Everything is sort of happening everywhere around us all the time. And it's just zeroing in on what seems like an energy or a particle that's being charged, right? Something is in charge or on kind of thing. And then the sort of array of phenomenon around it. I had this experience. So I used to be a tweaker, right? And that definitely changes your relationship with time for sure. And in the last year or so,
What's that? Stimulants?
methamphetamine,
Gotcha.
crystal meth,
Yeah.
right? And the fact that it's a
I was
crystal, not lost on
I was addicted to benzos after my older brother committed suicide in 2014, and it was talk about things changing your perception and relation with life. I was the opposite of that. I became like a slug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry,
Right.
keep going.
So during about the last year or so, maybe like last 2 years of my meth use, like it was the worst, even though I was using technically less than I had prior used. Like it just got into some stuff, some content for me that like was the most difficult, or like sort of the most, like I had to change. Like
Yeah.
I had to change.
Yeah.
Right. Even though like I wasn't getting in trouble or anything like that. It was just like I couldn't continue to do what I was doing.
There's
But
like a subconscious alarm clock that's just not turning off.
that, and then also like the clear understanding of the delineation between who you are and the realities you exist in when you're on drugs and when you're not, and it just becomes too contradictory. And
Yeah, you also just can't buy into it anymore. You're like, you get for the 10,000th time when you're getting high, you're like, this isn't real. I'm gonna come down. You just like, I can't lie. I've seen the movie so many times. I can't even. Like I've seen Anchorman so many times. Like I can't even laugh anymore. It's whatever.
For me, my experience was a little different. Like I became, and in the years I've been clean for 9 years now, right? I am more convinced that the realities that I experienced were real.
Sure.
But in order to become balanced enough inside to understand them clearly, to explain them, and to be responsible enough to understand what, if anything, I should do with that awareness and that knowledge, required me becoming the kind of person that I could not be when I was on drugs.
Yeah, it's you're up on the spy plane, you're 80,000 feet up, you're taking the pictures, you're like, cool, but we got to go back down and like bring them into the, we got to produce the film. It's
have to make meaning of it in a way that,
it's
right?
how I look at every, like, I don't think my experiences were fake at all the drugs I was on after my brother died, but it was definitely like, you now need to come back down to earth and get sober. And I can't tell you these stories if I'm like a greaseball, long hair, unemployed, like on pills, versus like, now I can do the podcast and I can kind of more maturely, I would like to think, and respectfully be like, yeah, this is what I went through in my 20s and this, and you can make sense of it and hopefully help others. But yeah, no, the events are real. They're no it's tuning into a radio station. That song is real. But at a certain point, you got to turn it off, and now tell people, you're like, so that's screamo music. Like, this is what this is about, or whatever. Grateful, whatever. You go for it,
Yeah. So during this time, I was trying to pull myself together, and I started working, and I had this kind of stupid job, but it did its intended function. I was like a merchandiser. Like I hung things like on, when you're in the supermarket and you're in the aisles, there's like these things that hang off that have like
Yeah.
like 5 in a row toys or
Like
sponges or whatever.
sunglasses or something. Yeah.
Right. So I would go to the markets and I'd go into the stock room in the back, and there'd be several boxes of stuff for me to go and hang
Yeah.
on to. Right. And I liked this job because they allotted a specific amount of time for you to do the job. And even if you took half that time, you still got paid for that amount of time.
Yeah.
Right. And if you went over that time, you could charge extra time.
Yeah.
So so there was kind of like a good deal that way. And I was pretty fast at it. So I was able to get a lot done and get paid for more hours than I was actually working. Right. But one day I was at this market that I had, I was early on in this job, and I went to work really fucked up. Right. I was like,
Yeah.
I was really fucked up, but like not necessarily more fucked up than I had been at other times, but I wasn't like, it was, I was on the high end of what was normal for me at that point. And also this location, this place where this store is in an area that I've had some other anomalous things. And I got like really confused. Like it was almost like there was a portal there to another version of the store that was opposite. And like, I couldn't figure, just in one area of the store, I couldn't figure out what went in which row, just these two aisles. Everything else was perfect. But whenever I came over to this area, I got confused, and it was like, it took me a fucking forever. I don't know how what would normally take me like less than 2 hours to do the whole store. I was there for like 5 hours.
Okay.
It created an anxiety in me that was like, I will never forget how I felt.
Okay.
Right there. And after that, while working there, every time I went back in those two aisles, even if I was sober, because during the time I worked there, I became a sober person, right? I could feel that same energy. So whatever happened with me that day, under the condition of being on methamphetamines, and the field that I generated left a mark there that I can go back, and as soon as I'm there, I feel it again. I don't get confused anymore. I don't like, right. Like I never had that happen again, but that sense of that feeling inside of me was still there. Right. And even like years later, after I didn't do that job, I went into that store because like I needed to get something to drink, and I was it right. And I just went back to that aisle. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like that, it's not quite as strong as it was the day that it happened, but like from 20 feet away to there, it's like, what the fuck, dude? And I could walk in it and I could walk out of it, right? I left a permanent scar or mark or vibration there. And then just recently, my partner and I were moving to a different apartment. And one of the places that we looked at was the apartment building I first lived in the very first time I moved to Austin. I've lived in Austin a number of times over the years. And when I lived at that apartment, I was partying a lot. I was going to a lot of raves. I was doing a lot of drugs. And when I would be tweaking, I would sit outside my front door and smoke cigarettes and talk on the phone or talk to whoever I was doing drugs with. And when we were over there looking at apartments, I'm like, let's go back and I'm going to show you where my old apartment was. When I stood right there in front of the door, right, I had that feeling, and I wasn't even thinking about it at that moment. And it was like, and then I was like, can you feel that? Right. My girlfriend stepped there and she's like, oh my God, because she knows she knows my energy. So if my energy is there, so when you are having an extreme or a dynamic or an expanded event, you leave a further signature somewhere than you normally do. We all know people who have a lot of energy. I'm one of them. People can feel it when you're approaching or when you're in the room, or, my dad called me Hurricane Emily my whole life. And,
that's why I do the podcast, because I don't shut up. But the podcast didn't start. I just started recording.
Right.
I never shut up.
Right. So there is something about radiation when you are radiating specific energies, right? So all of these time events, they're tuning in on a type of radiation, right? And if you think about a lot of these historical events, like I think the crucifixion of Jesus Christ was actually a nuclear event, And people can go look into Salvador Dali's Corpus Hypercubus, and his idea of nuclear mysticism. I think a lot of things that people have thought of as historical, spiritual, these are certain types of radiant events, right? And whether a lot of energy is created because we're having a war over power in genetics, or we're having an advancement in power, the discovery, like a fission reaction, humans' ability to create a mimic of a natural fission reaction, a fusion reaction, advancements in genetic engineering, right? Kind of things. These are all that whatever is being radiated there has an effect that is greater than just your like humdum day-to-day thing. So when someone is observing, like you don't hear them talk at the Chronovisor about like, oh yeah, we went back to 2,000 years prior and watched like a mother make apple pie for her son, right? Like while that's a real event, and if you knew to look for it, you could probably find it. The easier things to tap into are the ones that produce the most amount of blips on the screen.
Yeah.
Right. So, and what history is sort of this ongoing sort of advancement of power and genetics, and what our relationship to that is. When you have a radiant event, it affects the time-space continuum and allows for certain types of advancement based on people's thinking changing. But for some people, it also causes their bodies to degrade. So whenever you're talking about nuclear power plants, right, or nuclear reactions in general, and there's a reason why we have a nucleus in the cell is where most of our DNA is. So there's naturally a relationship between nuclear power and genetics. Some people will experience anomalies like time travel or extended senses. Some people will get carried away with their power and do corrupt things, and other people, their body won't be able to stand up to that energy field and they'll get cancer. You see this around that activity all of the time, right? And so this is really what's going on here. We have these like dynamic events and people react to it in different ways. And some people are able to advance to a higher level of existence and others fade away. There's a Blondie song called Fade Away and Radiate. It literally explains how this all works. I'm not joking. Like the entirety of the band Blondie's musical career is an encapsulation of sort of the esoteric and metaphysical ideas around nukes, around nuclear radiation. It's fat, but people think it's a punk pop band, and on some level it is, right?
You're talking about the it's like I don't know, like the visualizations of like space time, like the actual fabric, right? It's like they use the analogy of like space is it's like a trampoline, like the sun is a bowling ball, the earth is a marble, a black hole would be like an anvil. Like,
right.
It seems like these are the events kind of around and it wouldn't even necessarily need to be trauma. It could be something beautiful, right? It could just be like the best thing ever. Like I would imagine like Woodstock is there, like Jimi Hendrix playing the guitar backwards. It's like how many people had goosebumps watching that? Also,
but even some people think that's the worst thing ever. Like somebody who's having a bad trip thinks that's the worst night of their life, and someone else is like, "Oh my God, this is the most fun I've ever had."
What if I just had a thought then? Like, what if that's everything though? Like we talk about it, we go, "That's awesome," but some people had a bad trip. It's like, what if like you get to the afterlife and people are like, yeah, man, you guys really misinterpreted 9/11. And we were like, what do you mean? People jump into their death and they're like, no, you guys having a bad trip. Like that would be, but yeah, no, it's like those kind of events seem like it's absolute value, positive or negative. It's just like, how much does it press down on, what events do you remember? I remember the first time I drove a car. I remember the first time I said, I love you. I remember my brother's suicide. I remember getting arrested. They're all just these wild deviations of like a placid lake.
But they're all points in time in which something dynamic happened. You reacted the way you did, and then you had to decide what to do with that, and you changed for the better or for the worse going forward. And that altered your trajectory. Some people would say through this realm, but just sort of moving around it, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
We have an inner universe or an inner realm and an outer realm. And this shape that I call that they call mine Emily and yours Tommy, right, is the interface between, like, our body is the interface between the inside universe and the outside universe. But if you look at them, they're exactly the same thing as going on the inside as goes on out here, right? And it's just this relationship and sort of dynamic information exchange across the domains, right, that determine how you experience it. And then you can use your consciousness and your experience to make decisions about what you're going to do next or whatever, based on all of that. And you see some people make the same mistake over and over and over again, right? And other people take those difficult moments or those exciting moments and use them to sort of open up a whole new reality for themselves.
Yeah. And it's I mean, I remember I was pre-med and I kind of knew for a while that like when I first started, I was just like really scared of like screwing up in life. And I was like literally, it was my 20th birthday at a frat house. I just moved in on my sophomore year and I got way too high one night. And I was like, oh man, like the first year went by really quick. I'm like, in 3 short years, I'm going to be the old age of 23 and I'm going to be like a bum. I literally was like, I need to get a job. I'm like, what's the best job I could do? I'm like, I don't know, be a doctor. Literally just like high as hell on a couch and was like, I gotta be a doctor, job security, white coat. And I just like did that. And that's just like what I just like, I legitimately like was like kind of like hold my beer and then just didn't party at all for 3 straight years. Just all I did was blah, blah, blah. But towards the end of it, when I got into it, I kind of knew I was unhappy and I was like, ignoring the feelings. Every once in a while, I really never drank or smoked because I didn't have time to. But every once in a while, I'd maybe take like an edible or something and meditate. And I could just feel it itching. I'm like, you're not happy, you're not happy, you're not happy. And finally, like my last semester, I remember I got way too high after the bars one night. And I just saw a quote by, I think, Maya Angelou, and it said, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it wasn't so, but that started to change then from like, it's not just that you hate what you're doing, but like maybe there's something that you can be loving. And I was like, oh my God. And then I did shrooms the day I graduated for the first time, December 2013. And I just had the realization, I was like, I'm not happy and I can be happy. And I was like, so it was like, how do you move from that point? It was like, you can take that and you can muscle it back down and be like, no, gotta be a doctor. And I'd probably be a doctor now and it wouldn't be bad, but I'd probably hear like an episode like this and I'd be like, man, what would it be like to be your own boss? What if, and I would see me right now and I'd be like, wait, you're just having this wild conversation and that's your job? Like, this is my job right now. I was like having this conversation with you and it's like, I could be doing that instead of like, and then it's just the untold story. And it's like,
Yeah.
And then I would imagine if you go your whole life without doing it, that's maybe reincarnation. It's like, all right, give it another try. So that's like another reason like why I try to lean into difficult decisions. I would like to think I'm some moral good person, but the reality is I'm like, I'm pretty sure you have to retake the class if you fail. I failed from pre-calculus 3 times in college, 3 straight semesters. And it finally dawned on me. I was like, I'm not going to medical school unless I finish and do well. And I finally did it. So a lot of like doing the right thing or standing up for free speech or whatever is really, it's more of a selfish reason. It's more, I'm like, I think you just have to redo it. And if you clean the bathroom poorly, you got to have to re-clean it. If you take time to, it's like a job, whatever, I think it's Teddy Roosevelt, a job worth doing once is a job worth doing well. So it's like, get the vacuum out and you kind of like move around real quick and you're like, I'm already standing here with the vacuum plugged in.
Right.
Well, let's just do it. And that's so it's these big events, good or bad. You can ignore them. You can. You can absolutely ignore them, push them back down. But I think you have to come back to, and maybe you don't have to. Maybe karma is a choice. You can be like, I'm just going to go hang out in heaven for 1,000,000 years. But eventually you're looking at it. You're like, yeah, I'm going to give it another shot. I think I can win the Super Bowl this time. Like, that's kind of how, I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, that's how
what you just said. It's okay. So think about this. So I was just making the case that nuclear events create changes to humans' genetics that for some of them allow them to advance to the next level. When I say nuclear event, it could be like literally a nuclear event, the way we've been taught to think about it, or just like being in the lab at the moment fusion was achieved or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
And it fundamentally changes what is happening inside of you that either allows you to advance, or for some people, like they're not ready for that. The body breaks down and they're coming back and doing it again, right? But this is true with like we can have nuclear events in our own life.
Yeah,
Like
no, it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
huge embarrassment at an athletic event, or you fail out of law school, or
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? And then what is your response going to be? Are you going to get back up and do it right, and therefore change? Maybe throughout your whole family's genetic history, people have done that. There's been this history of people never achieving never living up to their potential, right? And if you're like, no, I'm going to get it right, like you change the course of history for your genetic line. Or
yeah.
for some other people, it's like, you know what? I failed at this and I recognize this is not the right thing for me, but
That
I am
too.
going to find something else that I love and that I enjoy, and then I'm going to work super hard at it and
Yeah.
exceed, right? And then you've maybe taken your family, who was always like the fifth best shoemaker in town,
Yeah.
and you realize like I'm not really a good shoemaker.
You're
like
the best
I like
trumpet maker.
blah blah blah, right? And then you're able to, so it's being able to really look at what has happened, be honest with yourself, and then change in response, right? So there's something about there's just a fundamental truth when power and genetics come together, and if you can sort of use that moment or that experience to reorient yourself in the realm or in the space-time continuum, it can be incredibly powerful. And I mean that on like the most maximum level you can think of, but even like little day-to-day occurrences, right? There was a piece of trash back there, you just walked by it, it wouldn't take much effort to go back and to pick it up. That practice that you're putting in will also be like, you know what, I forgot this detail in the paper I just wrote, or the job I just did, I need to go back and do it again. I need to fix it, right? It's building that sort of habit of like, this is something I can do to change myself or to change how things go, right? And the more ways that you experiment with doing that, the more options you're going to have when the moment of truth arrives. And that moment of truth, in my opinion, is that we live when you have the clarity that we live in a multidimensional, omnidirectional, strange space-time configuration realm, and it is your birthright as a human being to experience that in as many ways as you can, right? And for some people like to keep it steady, and they don't really like a lot of wild and crazy experiences, and for them just a life of peace and harmony is what they want, and more power to them. But for other people, we want to know what it is and how it works, right? And then when you are at that moment of truth, do you use that to do corrupt, immoral things, exercises of power against the other people who haven't figured that out yet? Or do you appreciate the experience of that which you have just discovered, and sort of hold that knowledge responsibly? And I'm not saying that there's a thing someone should necessarily do or not do with it, but like we all have seen when people engage in excess based on having knowledge that others don't. And personally, I might advise against that, right? And also like balancing the desire to tell everybody what you have discovered with the awareness that when you tell it to somebody, you deprive them of the ability of figuring it out for themselves.
And then also, it's like what Ram Dass would say about like pontificating. He'd be like, it's not moral to tell those who don't want to hear.
Correct.
And also, he goes, they can't hear you anyway.
Right.
So it's like, not only do I not want to, it's like hear about somebody's life, they're also speaking in German, and I couldn't if I wanted to. So it's just like, leave it alone. Yeah, that's like, the first time you do mushrooms, you're like, you do become the crazy person. You're like, everything's connected. It's all love, and people are like, hey, you got to pay rent, dude. Like, what are you doing, right? And
people are like, you just poisoned your brain. That's all.
Yeah, you're on, and you're like in this, and then it's but even that's a process and learning, and then so Yeah, things like that. Like, so the coronavirus, like, it then starts to make you think, like, I try to find, and I don't know if like this too is about like, the life you live, but I always think like, all this turnkey tyranny stuff and like NSA surveillance and, orbital weapons and total lockdown. I always think like what's the best outcome? Because to me, it's like it's easy and lazy to assume things are gonna go poorly. It's it's easy to go. My podcast is gonna fail. Statistically, it will fail. Most people don't achieve these endeavors. It's like, all right, that's like an entropy driven view. It's like if I drop a quarter, it's most likely going to like land on its side or like on the thin ridge. Sorry, it's going to land on the side. It's not going to land on the thin ridge. And like, it's just lazy. And so not only do I try to be positive and optimistic because it makes me enjoy my day-to-day life more and it makes me feel closer to God and less anxiety, less depression, but it's also, I like the challenge where I'm like, okay, yeah, statistically this endeavor won't work out. It is working. But I'm like, what would it be like if it did work? I would move out of my parents' house. I would get my own apartment. The studio would slowly get bigger and better. I'd have cooler and cooler guests. I would get more confident in the show and I would get sponsors and blah, 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 everything that has happened. So I try not to be delusional and be like, I'm going to win the
Right?
lottery today. But I'm also like, I don't just want to go, it's all going to be bad. Because I'm like, it's just, not only is it not fun, it's also just lazy. I'm like, yeah, you're probably not going to make the 50-foot 3-pointer.
It's super lazy, and there's not actually a lot of evidence for it other than people talking about it on the internet.
Yeah,
Like
everyone's saying it's not going to work. So, but sorry,
my girlfriend who just walked in, right? So here's that for people who are afraid of like the all-knowing state and federal agencies and blah 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 blah. She's a physical therapist, and to practice physical therapy in Texas, she has to get a license here and go right with the state or the county or whatever it is. Okay, so she did that. You have to get your fingerprints done, all that kind of stuff, right? So then, like a year or two later, after we came to Texas, she decided she wanted to go to massage school and get a massage license, right? And when she was applying for a massage license, they're like, you have to come in and file paperwork with the state again. And we have to take your fingerprints again and da 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 da. It's like literally the same office, and both are dealing with like touching people in a therapeutic way. And they can't figure out that they already have her application on file and her fingerprints on file because she's a physical therapist. So she had to go do it again. The whole procedure took like months.
yeah,
5 months.
yeah, no, the it doesn't,
right?
yeah, and it's not
That is the truth.
yeah, yeah. So it's like don't slide into the dangerous thought of like, well, I've got nothing to hide, but it's also just be a little rational.
Correct.
Like, yeah, man, they're probably watching the group of Chinese ultranationals who are under a front company that they figured out's a front company who are trying to buy plutonium. Like, sure, you and I are in the system somewhere, but it's like South Park when Cartman goes to the NSA and looks up his own file
Right.
and it says fat and unimportant.
Right.
He's
There
like,
you go.
no. He's like,
Listen,
I'm a brilliant mind. I'm a threat to the establishment. They're like fat and unimportant.
this is not an endorsement. Like I am a no government person and
Yeah.
whatever it is, but I also recognize the absolute
Don't
incompetence.
let it ruin your day-to-day life by being an anxious
Yeah.
meltdown of going, they're watching me.
Correct.
And even me, it's like, all right, well, I do a podcast. I talk about a lot of things. I'm sure I'm probably higher up than the average person. But even then, man, okay, so let's assume they're looking at podcasts. You think they're not maybe focusing a little more on, I don't know, Joe Rogan? Like, relax. So, but the point with like the positive.
They have an office at the Joe Rogan
Yeah,
podcast.
well, of course, yeah, no, of course, they text them, yeah, no, but like I look at like just world views then, and I always try to, and a lot of people roll their eyes because a lot of like the military guys I have, like Delta Force guys, are always like, you're a pussy, and I'm like, whatever, but like when I try to be positive, for me, it's more of like an intellectual. I'm like, I want to beat the MCAT practice test on hard. So I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a given. The world's we're slipping into tyranny. they're gonna, we're going to nuclear war and it's gonna be an AI. I'm like, okay, yeah, most likely, sure, but that's not fun. Not only is it depressing, it's
I totally
also
agree with you. I
but it's
totally
also just like not fun. So it's like, yes, I have
yes.
a conflict of interest. I do want there to be world peace and clean energy and everyone, experience the love of being a parent and a brother and a whatever and all that. Cool. I'm also just on like a statistical scale. I'm like, I want to see the 95-yard Hail Mary. Just
Yes.
that's the highlight reel. When you go to YouTube and look up, I don't know, best NFL passes ever, you're not watching like a 5-yard toss at a high. You're like, I want to see Tom Brady throwing it with 2 seconds left in the fourth quarter. It's just fun. And so
Right.
like,
I like stuff that's not like fun, interesting, not boring. If it's
yeah,
boring,
and
I'm not
so I'm
saying
like
it. Yeah.
what's improbable? And I'm like, what would be improbable would be like if somehow the chronovisor or some technology around it existed. What if it fell into the right hands? I just want to see, because it's the most boring movie you've seen. Him, the guy gets the girl. Blah, blah. I'm like, okay, I get it. We're gonna fall into dystopia, and AI is gonna take over the world, and Satanists run the. I'm like, I've read it on everything on Reddit and Twitter, and I've read okay, whatever. I'm like, I just want to see like what is the interesting movie script where it works out. Yes, I'm biased because I'd like to live in that peaceful world. I'm also just curious. Like, what is it? Is it an NSA program? And is it, do the good guys win? And like that's what I want to say. I like to think of something like the Chronovisor. I'm like, what if it did fall into the right? Why does it always have to be an evil genius that gets the? I mean, like you know
So
what I mean? It's like
100%. This
so
is the song
yeah,
I've been singing for
yeah.
a while now that like I'm aware that the dark dystopic reality, like that's a version that exists out there and might even be likely or whatever, but it's boring, so I'm not
It's also
interested,
boring. Okay, yeah,
right?
whatever. They're gonna kill you. You die in a concentration. Yeah, all right, but that like next. We've seen
So
it.
I have two thoughts, right? And then I kind of got to wrap it up because I
Mm.
have another show in a little bit and I need to eat some
Yeah,
lunch.
you're good.
So two thoughts. What if the chronovisor exists inside of everyone, right? Like if you notice that the ceiling at the Vatican, particle accelerators, black holes, they all look like our eyes,
Yeah.
right? And if we each have our own unique chronovisor that has to do with the lipids and proteins and things like that that are inside of what we view light with, and we all decode information differently, right? From a different angle, from a different perspective. I don't know, like there's pretty cool Bill Donahue lecture on YouTube where he talks about light photons and angles or angels, and maybe angles and angels are the same thing,
Mm.
right? So I recommend people take a look at that. So we each have our own unique chronovisor. It's just learning how to use it. And second, like I always say, like, sure, I would love it if in the debate about whether you would like life to be good or interesting, and while good and interesting would be the ideal, if I had to pick between like good and interesting, I choose interesting every time,
Mm.
right? So may whatever happens be interesting, and opportunity for dynamic experiences that allow us to move to the next level of our understanding or perception of what's actually going on here.
Mm. I, yeah. I'll let you go wrap it up. But like, so I grew up in New England, and like I never was like really into sports, but like I just through osmosis, and like everyone knows, like even if you're not a sports fan, like Red Sox, Yankees, and the Red Sox just couldn't win it for like whatever a million years,
Yep.
and like you've seen it a million times, and it's Bill Buckner, and the ball goes through his arm, and it's just like okay, at a certain point you start to just accept it's like the Red Sox are cursed and they're never gonna win, and the Yankees are the evil empire, and it's repetitive and it's comfortable and it's boring, and I mean I remember I was 13 and I watched it in 2003 and they lost to the Yankees, and then remember in 2004 like the Red Sox go down by 3 games in a 7-game series, and then like they win in like what, like the 18th inning in
Mm-hmm.
game 4, and you're like, what? And then like the next day they win in like the 14th inning, and you're like, what? And then they go to the Yankee Stadium and like they somehow win 2 more, and then they go, and it's like So not only did they finally break the curse, but they broke it in a way that if you read that in a book, you'd say this is so cheesy, but it's reality. And I love going back and like watching video, and I still don't really care about sports, but I love going back and like watching those games that like, it's like 4 a.m. game 4, you're down 3. It's like you're about to be executed. And then
Yep.
like he hit a home run and you just hear like this whole entire stadium like come to life. And I'm like, everyone wants to see that. And like even like half my family's from New England, the other half's from New York. Even they will say they're like, I hated losing, but they're like, that was so cool to watch like an actual cheesy sports movie happen in
Right.
real life. And it's so I try to look at that. I'm like, remove even being a Red Sox fan. Let's say I'm like a Yankees fan. I'm like, okay, so and the same in the same vein of being from New England, seeing the undefeated Patriots who become the evil empire lose to the Giants in the most improbable game ever, where
Right.
it's all these BS like catches. And like, as much as I hated that, I remember watching this and I'm like, I'm just seeing it from the other side, and it's still, I do love it because it's
It's
just the
made right.
craziest story. It's like, I want to win the lottery, but if I watched you win the lottery, I'd still be like, that's so badass. That's what I want to see. So
Yeah.
I guess, and yeah, in conclusion, like I do hope the Chronovisor exists, and I just want to see the least probable outcome, which is
Sure. The most
peace.
interesting, the
Yeah,
most
I'm like,
exciting.
yeah, I'm like, if
Absolutely.
we lived in a world of nonstop utopia, you might be like, I kind of want to see Hitler come to power. Just that morbid
Right. Thank
curiosity. You're like,
you.
I just want to see it. Like,
Totally.
like playing video games all the time. I'm like, I get we're the hero. What if I start killing all my teammates? Because it's just funny. Like, so that's what I want. It's like, but we live in nonstop kind of dystopia and pandemics and genocides. Out of curiosity, I just want to see the positive outcome.
All
Right.
right, I'm
So,
with you.
but yeah, I'll let you go. This show, most shows run an hour. We went way over that, but that was fun, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I had a
Yeah,
good time. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to our mutual friend Jerry for setting it up. And
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll let you go. Please,
awesome.
please, please, please email me your Rumble and your locals, and I'll put it in the description.
I don't really do much on Rumble, so
Whatever. Any YouTube, I don't.
I'll send
Whatever.
you my shtick. Absolutely. Thank you for
I'm
having
banned from
me.
YouTube, so that's why I don't say it. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, send it to me. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you so much for watching.
Recording
God bless
stopped.
everybody. Much love. Peace.